Hello and welcome to the TEConnect podcast. I'm John Martin.
And I'm Dean Reverman.
Dean, has your behavior changed any since a hopefully once-in-a-century pandemic came along a couple years back?
Yeah, right? I mean, some things I do today I didn't do before.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Around, some good things, right? Exercise and things of that nature.
Right.
Maybe the things that I'm eating a little bit different. Shopping. Are we going to go there today?
So are you one of those people that developed healthier habits during the pandemic and not just sitting around on your couch?
I continued,
spooning ice cream in your mouth and watching Netflix all day?
Well, after the first couple of weeks, I became very cognizant of the fact that, oh man, some of these behaviors aren't going to work, aren't going to pan out really well.
When we went from that whole, it's just going to be a couple weeks thing to,
exactly.
it's going to be a couple years, we should probably, I get it. Okay, I understand. All right, well then what about your behaviors as a consumer?
Oh,
though?
man. Everything's online. Everything's picking up on, at the curbside and stuff like that. Omni-channel, all the things that we've been talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind
Okay.
of into that stuff.
Well, that's our topic today. We're going to get into retail consumer behavior.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Tony Boncore with us from Honeywell. He's going to help us get into some of this, what's going on in the customer space, what behaviors have changed, what's going on with physical stores, what should be changing there, what should retailers acknowledge, what can our VARs do to help retailers acknowledge the current
We're going to get into
space.
some of the tech in that
We're
space.
going to talk about some of the new tech, either
Yes.
stuff that's coming along or what we might be keeping an eye on in the future.
Very good.
I think we got some interesting, behavioral issues here to discuss with retail.
Yes, I like that. The behavioral angle. Absolutely.
All that plus our usual value to the VAR and what's tech connecting with us. It's time to plug in and get connected.
Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. It's time to get connected.
All right, our guest today is Tony Boncore. I said it wrong in the intro. You told me beforehand how to pronounce it correctly, and I said it wrong the first time
dang.
anyway. So,
well, anyway.
But, Tony Boncore is joining us today. He is the Global Retail Marketing Manager with Honeywell. Tony, thank you so much for coming on today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your day-to-day role there at Honeywell.
Yeah, of course. First, thanks for having me. It's a pretty exciting opportunity. So I spent about 25 years in the retail segment, both as an operator and later a supplier. So fortunate enough to come on board here at Honeywell a little less than a year ago. And my role was really specific into generating not just the sales and marketing strategy, but just as a subject matter expert to bring some of the current trends happening in retail from a technological, behavioral, a workflow standpoint, and just ensuring that, Honeywell's focused on the right areas to help solve some of the retailers' biggest problems.
Yeah.
Love it.
Good stuff. And there's a lot going on,
Oh,
obviously,
yeah,
as we've been talking about in this
I
space.
feel like lately a lot of the guests that we talk to have been like with their companies, within maybe the last year or two fairly frequently, but have a long history of stuff that is very relatable to what they're doing.
Yep.
And that tells you a lot about, that a lot of our vendors and a lot of our partners are clearly going out there and saying, hey, we need to bring someone in who knows their stuff about it, something very specific to our channel and to what we're trying to accomplish. And I think Tony's a perfect example of that because he's going to know a lot about what we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely.
So let's get into this topic then of this, the retail consumer and how their behaviors have changed. So there was an interesting Forbes article I came across basically talking about the NRF, the recent NRF show. And they mentioned that the IBM Institute for Business Value and NRF released a consumer study prior to the event where 72% of respondents still use the store as all or the primary part of their purchase experience.
Interesting.
I'm not one of those 72%. However, the younger generations, I'm also not that, have shifting priorities. 36% of Gen Zers prefer a hybrid shopping
Interesting.
experience.
Okay. All right.
So again, obviously, a lot of consumer behaviors have changed over the last couple of years, but there was already some change kind of going on anyway. Now that we're kind of getting into this maybe sort of a less restrictive part of the pandemic in many parts of the country and the world in general, what are you seeing right now? What are your expectations for the next year or so as far as retail consumer behavior is concerned?
Yeah, so it's a two-part question, and I think a lot of us have really attested some of this, elevated approach to retail due strictly to the pandemic. I think the pandemic may have heightened and fastened some of the approaches retailers were taking. But I think the behaviors of the consumer were there prior to the pandemic. And there's a lot of innovations that started generating these behavioral shifts. The pandemic escalated them for the consumer. Retailers had to adjust. So I always like to go back before the pandemic and say this started well a long time ago, maybe in the late 90s, and then coming into the mid 2000s and then late 2000s when the pandemic hit. You've seen this shift of innovations, everything from social media to shopping online. If you really think about it, Amazon is what, 35 years old at most. So I think there's some of these behaviors that have started to occur prior to the pandemic hitting. The pandemic really escalated retailers to look at where their budgets were from, building brick and mortars and aligning accordingly, and kind of having a slow approach to what we call it omni-channel. And I'm not the biggest fan of that word, and I'll explain that later. But I think they've shifted their attentions now to really enabling their stores to adapt to what the behaviors of the consumers are. Excuse me. And those consumers really have an expectation around having that same experience no matter what channel they're on. So if they're online, it's sitting in front of their computer on their mobile device. If they're in a store, if they're reading articles, reading ads, things of that nature, their expectation is for that to be seamless. All of that has been escalated due in part to the pandemic. Now, to the second part of the question, where do I see this going? I think the interesting thing of the Forbes article where 72% of consumers still feel comfortable going to brick and mortar. And that's going to be, I think, that right there is critical. I think brick and mortar will be around for a very long time. How that brick and mortar is used will be a little bit different. So you're going to see, you're already starting to see this, you're going to see those brick and mortar locations being used as distribution. And I call it, leveraging their enterprise inventory, because inventory sits everywhere from their distribution centers into their stores, specifically with some of the supply chain constraints. So consumers are always going to have that go to the store, buy in store. They also want to have that option, to your point, is to shop online and be equipped. There's different types of consumers. So I think that's the other piece you have to consider is retailers have to adapt to what the consumer wants, be it online, in store, mobile, computer, tablet, so on and so forth. It's a pretty interesting point for retailers to be in today.
Let's dive a little bit into the transformation that's happening. You touched on it already about how retail is kind of having to transform around being a DC, a distribution center. I mean, to me, this is one of the fascinating aspects of how the behavior of the consumer has, and everything that Tony just mentioned has really kind of exacerbated the fact that now retailers have to react that they have this inventory. The inventory might be spread across multiple stores, could be across regions, across the nation, but even down to the SMB level, right? I mean, if they have just a handful of stores or something like that, leveraging inventory is huge. And what has happened is now these retail spaces are now distribution centers. I mean, whereas it was just, receiving, a lot of times. Well, now they have to flip that, not only receiving, but make their inventory seen, teach associates how to pack goods and stuff like pick, pack, and things of that nature. So what do you think, Tony? I mean, it's really transformative. Let's on this whole aspect of the DC, right? I mean, retailers have had to really flip a lot.
Yeah, I think so if you go back prior to some of these innovations, prior to the pandemic, it was kind of separated. It was a dichotomy. You had distribution network and then you had store network. And I think the primary challenge for retailers over the course of the last 10 years is to bring these together and operate as one. So how do we do that? And so you have to look at the inventory as an enterprise. And it doesn't matter where it sits. If it's sitting in a distribution, if it's sitting in a dark store, if it's sitting in an active store, that 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 inventory is usable. So there may be purchases that are desirable products, from it's sitting in the southeast, but and someone in the northwest is interested in it. So it's sitting in their enterprise, but it's not local. So now they have access to it no matter where they sit. That particular location can then do it from a ship from store to that consumer. The consumer has no idea if it came from a store or if it came from a distribution center. So to the retailers, it's really enabling their inventory to be enterprise ready to ensure that they're meeting the consumer demand. And consumers want what they want. They want it immediately. They don't want to wait. That's another thing. I think with the speed of what has happened in terms of innovations and technology, consumers have become very impatient. They want something fast. Everything has become efficient. Let's get it now, get it now, get it now. So retailers have to adjust to that as well too.
And Tony, what's your take on, so that's the outbound, but we're also hearing a lot of stories about coming back, like returns and kind of that reverse logistics that needs to happen as it relates to that. What's your take on that? I mean, what are you seeing in the marketplace and how these retailers are having to handle that?
Hugh, that's a great question, and it's a significant challenge. Not just from a displaced merchandise perspective, and I can go down a few different paths with this. So, from a reverse logistics perspective, specifically in displaced returns, so you buy online, you return to store. A couple of interesting facts: 70+%, it's between 70 and 74%. Different studies show different statistics, but 70 to 74% of a consumer is going to make a decision on where they purchase based on the return policy. So it has to be a seamless policy, meaning that it has to be as seamless as shopping, if that makes sense. If the return policy is strict, then folks are going to go elsewhere to a different retailer, thus impacting loyalty. So this is an interesting point because people aren't going to buy just one shoe, right? They're going to buy multiple of the same style of shoe, different sizes to ensure they fit. Then they're going to bring it back to the retailer. So that's why that statistic's important. Now, what happens is, from a return perspective, retailers are struggling because they don't know what to do with this product. And then there's an element of sustainability that plays into this. Multi-billions of dollars of product every single year is thrown out because there's nowhere for the retailers to displace it. You're starting to see retailers now tell consumers, keep the product, we'll refund your money, because it's cheaper for them than having to figure out what to do with it. On the retail side, there's a lot of movement right now, specifically in software, as it relates to developing algorithms that can help replace merchandise in the most effective manner, be it in a store that's carrying the product, because a lot of retailers have moved into third-party relationships where they're selling product from third-party, vendors, if you will. So if that product comes back to a particular store and they don't have that SKU active in that building, what do you do with the product? So there's algorithms being built at a software perspective that's saying this product is most effective and most active in this particular location. It'll direct the store what to do, tell the store how to handle it, so on and so forth. Then there's another element of this where there's some, it's called re-commerce, where products coming back to the store. Then they're refurbishing it, determining whether or not it makes sense for it to be resold. It sits on a third-party website, and they'll re-commerce the product as a refurbished. You can see this on Walmart, Amazon. They all are doing something similar to help in terms of bridging some of that waste from a return perspective. So the consumer really is driving the retailers to have to alter some of this. Here, the last point I want to make about returns is there's this. Retailers don't want to get rid of returns, and they don't want them to happen, but they don't want to say don't come back to the store. And here's why. When you come back to the store, that's foot traffic. That converts to sales. So conversion's important. So this is where I think this is going to be interesting over the next year. And I know a lot of this has happened because of the pandemic and people changing their behavior to shop from home. But this next, I think, 18 months, and it's going to be critical, specifically if you start to see some companies like Target, for example, announced this last week that they're going to, like I mentioned, they're going to say, hey, keep the product, we'll refund the money. How is that going to work for them? Is there going to be a deterioration in in-store sales because that foot traffic is no longer going to the store? So there's going to be some interesting things that happen from a behavioral perspective that I know I'm going to keep a close eye on and see how these retailers adapt.
Really fascinating. I mean, you're right on the return policy. Of course, it always raises awareness around Christmas time, right?
Oh, yeah.
All the retailers are saying, now be sure you know our return policy. You got 30 days to return this. It's always like, oh, well, calculating the days. Okay, well, that's going to be after Christmas,
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, to your point, I think the expectation is, I'm going to have at least, 30, 60, 90 days after my purchase that I'd be able to return that.
Right.
Which is okay, was fine maybe in a world that was pre-online or it wasn't as dominant on the online world where the expectation is you just bring it back to the store.
Yeah.
But that's changed a lot, right?
Well, and let's be honest, there's a lot of retailers now too that don't even they don't even bother with any of this like super strict return policy now. It's
Mhm.
not has to be within X amount of time to
Well,
X
to
amount.
Tony's point,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's the experience, right? And if you're going to have
Exactly.
a negative experience, well, I'm just going somewhere else that I can.
Because if you come across something that you've, I don't know, you've had around for a while and you just never bothered to use and it's still in fine condition or unopened or whatever, doesn't have an expiration of any kind, the expectation for a lot of people is going to be, I can probably still go and return this.
Yeah.
And to Tony's point, I think if you're the store that doesn't want to do that or has very strict rules, you're probably going to potentially lose some business. And again, this idea of like if someone comes in and wants to do that, there's a good chance, especially if they feel happy about the process and you say, sure, give me that back. We'll go ahead and take it back and give you a credit, or do you want to shop around? There's a good chance they're going to look around and say, well, I like these guys. Like I thought I was gonna have to fight about this. There's literally like a little meme or a TikTok video I think I saw or whatever of like, someone going into a store and the woman's like making it, returning a purchase and the attendant takes it back and is like, okay, sure, we can do that. I'll give you a refund back. Here's your money. And she kind of looks at her and she goes, okay. And the attendant looks at her and says, you were expecting a fight, weren't you? She's like, yeah, I kind of was. And she's like, all right, I can we can do that if you want.
We can make this hard.
So she has like a little fight with her, and the one's like, oh, I'm going to take this to your manager. You better give me. She's like, fine,
Right.
So they have a little tiff about it or whatever, because that's the expectation is that you got to fight for this stuff and you shouldn't have to anymore.
No, you shouldn't. Tony, you were going to say?
Yeah, well, it's all true. I was thinking back like 10, 15 years ago when I was in stores working. If you knew there was some type of discrepancy between a consumer and a store associate, it generally was at the service desk about returns. So, but you're absolutely right. I think the other piece of all of this, I mean, you can sum all of these things up at the end here, but it really comes down to how you capture that loyalty. And all these policies that store present, be it from online purchase to returns, it doesn't matter. All of them affect loyalty. So to your point is, does it make sense for us to be so strict that we're going to lose a loyalist, someone that we want to maintain and gain as a long life or a lifetime consumer? So return policy, it's going to be one of those things from a concept perspective that I know retail and retail experts, analysts, everybody are going to keep their fingers on and keep a close eye on, because it's interesting. I know Amazon applied some of this a few years ago in terms of how they do returns, but to see some of these brick and mortar retailers follow along will be interesting in how it adapts in terms of their financials as well as the loyalists that they're trying to attain.
Really good take there. I agree. And I still think it's fascinating. I don't know how it came about that Kohl's won the Amazon, like if you need to return it, that is a coup. If you ask me, for Kohl's, I mean, talk about getting foot traffic, because I go in and return my stuff at
and stuff that you couldn't even normally buy at Kohl's.
Not only,
but you can just go return it there.
Exactly,
anyway.
return it there, and then they one up it. Oh, you can have 15% off of anything in our store. Thank you for dropping this Amazon thing. I mean, I think it's brilliant. Do you know how that came about, Tony? That the Kohl's.
I don't know how it came about. I know that from a financial perspective, I think everyone knows Kohl's was looking at some, doing different methods and different processes to help bring in foot traffic. I know that Amazon, when they acquired Whole Foods, they were doing something similar. So you could go into a Whole Foods, bring your Amazon returns. They had it all set up from a process and systems perspective. Didn't matter what it was. It didn't matter if you purchased it at Whole Foods or not. It was a kind of a hub for Amazon. So I know they had that benchmark. And I know that Kohl's was, looking for ways to bring, to your point, foot traffic in, and returns do that. So you can return something that you don't sell at Kohl's, but yet you're in the store, that's the whole point of what marketing and advertising is to get people into store. So I think it's just another way to get folks in the store, and I think it makes complete sense. And to your point, I think it is a brilliant method to see how that works as well too.
A couple of things I want to dive in that you were talking about here real quick, because let's go back to the whole, what do you do with the product once it's returned? In our industry, we deal with that. We have RMAs, but we work with vendors to maybe get new boxes so that we can rebox it, and basically it's a new product, and we can sell it as new out the door. Tony, are you seeing anything from the vendor side, the suppliers, the people that are making the clothes or whatever, where they're trying to help retailers in that painful process of returns? I can see a world where maybe they simplify some of their packaging so that, if something is returned, it can be repackaged very easily and turned into a net new
waste,
product, and they don't have to it's dented, or the product is the package isn't exactly, so we can't sell it as new. What's your take there, Tony? You seen anything on the supplier side?
I have, and it's not necessarily on the suppliers from a to the retailer in terms of product supply. And I know there's some folks that are looking at, RFID everywhere as it relates to the soft goods and soft lines. So I mean, I think that's one aspect that helps with, inventory accuracy, helps with inventory placement. Now, from a supplier or vendor perspective, there's some really interesting stuff happening. And I'll give you an example. There's a company right now that's looking at crowdsourcing in terms of how they pick up returns. It doesn't matter where the return or what the vendor is, or excuse me, what the retailer is, if it's Macy's or Target or Walmart, it doesn't matter. What they're looking for is collecting that product as is, no box necessary. They'll pick it up. So think of, DoorDash delivering your food. So think of this on the opposite side. Now they're going to pick up your return, collect your return, bring it they'll source the return, bring it to, a FedEx location or a UPS location. The retailer then has it placed accordingly. So it'll say send to this location based on what that return is, be it a soft line, a hard good, electronic. That then goes in from after it's picked up by this company that does the crowdsourcing. That then goes into whatever that placement is, and it'll sit on a pallet and at a 3PL. And that pallet then is sent to the retailer's whatever destination of choice, be it to another vendor, to a e-commerce, back into their active inventory. So it helps reduce some of that loss that retailers are experiencing from returns. It also helps reduce the cost of the return because it's sourced into one location. So not that I'm not seeing stuff happening on the product side for retailers, but from a vendor perspective, I think that is worth mentioning because these are the ideas that I think retailers really have to think about to battle this return issue, if you will. Not just on top of the placement when you bring it back to store, but if the consumer expects the delivery to them within 24 hours, they also expect that return to be picked up in the same fashion and manner. So how do you meet that high demand that the consumer has? Again, consumer behavior.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard some stories about, kind of opened up my world. There's a whole, underworld's not the right answer, but there's a whole industry around
hidden world.
Thank you. Around Amazon returns. And like they have just pallets and pallets and pallets in warehouses, and they'll open the doors every now and then. Then there's like a mad rush, like when they open the doors at Walmart on whatever on Black Friday, right? And you can get the $20 TV, and so there's just this crush of people. And apparently, people make their lives doing this, where they'll run around these pallets and pick out the best items, and then basically put them back up for sale on Amazon as new. So this innovation is happening, and so it's interesting to hear that crowdsource story, and it totally makes sense to me that's maybe where some of the innovation is happening.
Potential value there, because I would venture that I would say the majority, definitely more than half, and probably in like a 3/4 range of returns that are made, especially of Amazon stuff, is still in perfectly saleable condition.
Oh, of course, right? Yeah.
I mean, it's usually just a case of like, this isn't.
You open it.
This isn't what I expected.
Yeah,
exactly. This isn't what I was looking
wrong
for.
Size.
Right.
Put it
Wrong
back in the bag.
size. Right. Wrong size, wrong color, something a little bit off, something I just decided I didn't need. Yeah, exactly. So there's a huge amount of value, I would think, there. So, well,
the one thing I want to say one thing but as an e-commerce retailer like Amazon, they still have to inspect that stuff that comes back because the consumer can easily be turned off if they're sent something that's, been looked through, opened, something of that nature. So that's another process from a reverse logistics perspective on returns. That is a strain on the e-commerce side of retail. So they have to do this inspection to ensure it's resellable. It's a good point.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, let's get into this whole physical versus e-commerce thing. And there was some stats I came across from CTA.tech that was talking about, it was an article about the 7 trends reshaping smart retail. As always, I'll have these links in our show notes. It says e-commerce will reach 19% of retail sales by 2024, up from 15% in 21. I know 19% never sounds like a huge number, but when you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry, that's a lot. Even that 4% increase is a lot of money.
Absolutely.
And 76% of retailers say that online stores are expanding their role as experiential and fulfillment hubs, which kind of goes back to what we've been talking about this whole time here. So again, these physical stores, they're not going away. We know a lot of people still want to use them, and there's multi-purpose uses for them now too. But how should retailers be changing their mindset about how to accommodate those customers that are either predominantly or completely shopping online and, don't necessarily want to get out or expect to get out as often or use stores as often? What should that mentality, create for these retailers that we're typically working with?
Yeah, that's a great. So first, I don't think there's a difference in terms of the mentality in store versus the mentality online. That experience has to be seamless. It has to be conjoined. So if you build a cart at home, per se, let's say you're on whatever website, whatever retail website, and you're building a cart at home, you should be able to go into the retailer and pull up your cart through whatever loyalty app, through whatever it is. And then they should be able to help accommodate whatever the gaps are in terms of product selection and things of that nature. And then vice versa. If you build a cart in store, you don't want to purchase it there, but you can see that, there's product that you can look in showroom, but you want it to have it delivered. All of that stuff needs to be seamless. The consumer demands that. So to me, it's not just about brick and mortar and the online experience. And that again, I mention this all the time. There's only really two channels if you think about this. There's brick and mortar, and then there's e-commerce. Now, e-commerce is an interesting one. There's multiple tentacles that lead back to these e-commerce channels, be it through social media, through through your mobile commerce, traditional e-commerce online, through live streaming purchasing. All of that goes back to an e-commerce sale. So how do you bridge all of those from an e-commerce perspective with the brick and mortar? The consumer really wants that. And I also mentioned this quite a bit. Consumers are getting to the point where a retailer should know them better than their best friend. And I think that's a very interesting point. No, from your birthday, your clothes selection, size, makeup, whatever it is, from a clienteling standpoint, a consumer expectation from experiential shopping, be it online or in a brick and mortar, that's how this is how retailers need to start thinking is, I need to know that individual and make them feel they're that important, that I am their best friend as whatever brand I am. So it's a hard question to say specific to e-commerce in terms of what those shifts are. I do think this 19% that you're mentioning is very, I think we all know that's what's going to happen. I think it'll taper off a little bit. I think folks getting back out, to your earlier point, I think, Dean, you made the point around, folks going into brick and mortar. When they lifted the bans from the pandemic, they saw shopping as like going to an amusement park. Oh, finally, we can get out of the house and do something. So I think this will also taper off a little bit. You'll see a decline in some of the e-commerce sales, and I think experts and analysts are saying the same thing. But if these behaviors aren't going anywhere, what has happened over the last 2 years that have elevated what was already happening over the last 20, it sticks forever. And I think retailers have to have strategies that align, because to your point, a 20% e-commerce business and the 80% brick and mortar is billions and billions of dollars. They have to have strategies that align individually for those, that bring both of those worlds together for the consumer at hand.
Yeah. I can tell you, as the father of a 19-year-old daughter and 11-year-old daughter, brick and mortar is alive and well.
Right,
they still like going to the store, trying stuff on. Yeah, they do a fair amount of shopping online, right? Especially if they know exactly what they want. They're getting whatever Air Jordans or whatever the shoe is. They know exactly what the shoe, and they know their size, so they'll get that online. But if it's discretionary, or like they want to make a decision or something, they still love going out and shopping. Yeah.
I love this whole idea of like the cart that's following you around kind of thing.
I do like that idea.
I think especially like fashion retail is one in particular where I think that can be very beneficial. If, again, you're online at home and you're like, man, I like this, I like this, I like this. Throw it all into your cart. But, let's be honest, and you don't know how something's going to look until you try it on. Like you have to be able to actually try it on and decide if it looks good on you and you like it. So I love that idea of being able to just do that at home, pick out all that stuff so you don't have to spend all the time walking around the store, and then being able to, ping your store and just say, hey, I'm coming in on this day, and they have that stuff ready for you. And you go in, you try the stuff on, you figure out what fits.
The customer experience,
yeah,
right?
And then again, when you get there, when you have that moment and you're doing that customer experience and you're trying all the stuff on, you as the consumer still get to decide how that stuff gets to you. Mm-hmm. Are you taking it out in a bag that day? Maybe you recognize that what they had in stock was one size too small, so you have them order the other size and send it to your house instead. Mm-hmm. Is it something you're to come back and pick up later? Like, I just feel like, we're at this point where as a retailer, if you're not offering all these options, if you're not putting yourself in a position to allow this kind of, again, I know we don't like the omni-channel word, but this multiple channels of ways to connect with a store and shop and pick up and whatever, try stuff on, you're going to start falling behind. Even though more people might be getting back out and are okay with the in-person shopping. Yeah. As we've been talking about all along, it's that experience. It's that feeling of what I'm doing here and what I did at home are essentially the same thing. They should know who I am when I walk in.
And the cart is more valuable than your browsing.
Yeah.
I think you have complained quite a few times on this show that some algorithm isn't exactly right on you because they think you're a mid-30s, early 30s woman looking for a certain type of
fashionable
fashion.
clothes, swimsuits.
No, that's not me.
Yeah.
But a cart is a little bit more indicative of what you might actually be buying.
Exactly. Yeah.
Tony, what's your take on omni-channel? So you saying you don't like the word? Let's go back to that one or whatever. What's your take there?
Yeah, so I just think it confuses. I mean, here's what happens. So when you share with somebody that doesn't understand retail and you say, yeah, I work in this omni-channel world. If you have to define what omni-channel is, like omni-channel means this. I mean, it kind of makes sense. It's omni many channels, okay, I get it. But it's confusing from a retail perspective, specifically when I was an operator in stores. I'm trying to explain folks, look, I'm in this role and my role is focused on omni-channel. Like, well, what does that mean? But I do think there's another way to look at this. So we've talked a lot about brick and mortar, which is the physical element of the retail side. And we talked a lot about the digital side. And this, I know you guys have heard this, everybody probably has. But I think the concept of phygital, the physical and digital combining, the phygital world, that makes sense because phygital covers everything in store. It covers everything that's in front of you on your computers. It covers everything from a handheld social media, if it's, on your mobile phone. I like phygital because it makes sense. Physical and digital come together. Omnichannel to me it's always has been. And I was a director of omnichannel, and I had to tell people what that means. So, but I don't even know if I would have said, "Hey, I'm the director of phygital." People would be like, "What the heck?" So to me, this is an interesting concept. It's just my personal preference. It's just easier to explain that there's a digital world in retail, and then there's a physical world in retail, and the ultimate goal is to bring them together, and that's a huge task. That's why I don't know. I don't say I don't like omnichannel.
Yeah, I can promise you the word phygital is going to be in the description for this episode.
Yes.
I will find a way to include
Googled
that,
many
and
times.
probably in the social media marketing too. I like that. That's why. That's why
Never heard of that word.
words. Yeah.
So you officially coined it for us. So there you go.
Yeah, I can't say I coined that word. It's been around for a little bit, but
Right,
it's definitely a word that I like.
Yeah.
First we've heard. Yeah. It's new to us. Well, let's wrap up here by getting into the tech part of things, because that's what our resellers obviously are concerned about. It's like, all right, well, what can I sell to do all of this cool stuff we've been talking about and make this consumer behavior work in my favor? Mm-hmm. So what new technologies are helping retailers to meet these these new and expanding consumer attitudes, and what should they be keeping an eye on for the future or expecting that might change, doing right now, et cetera, to stay on top of these trends and make sure that what they're trying to do and selling more hardware, services, software, et cetera, is going to fit into what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so that is a huge question because retail is an entire supply chain. You guys know, from manufacturing to out the door. So there's so many different elements of technology that are happening within retail, within the entire retail supply chain, and it all comes down to efficiency. We all know that there's labor restraints within retail. There's labor restraints within many different elements of commerce today. So really, really simply put, if it makes a retailer more efficient in terms of responding to the consumer need, it is something they should be looking at. So I know there's big do-it-yourself companies that using robotics for picking in their distribution centers. It's a more affordable way than having to staff with a human. They'll have one person that's responsible for 4 or 5 robots. Those robots can pick 24 hours a day. They're picking product that is being sent to the end user, the consumer. So robotics, I think, is something that you're seeing specifically in some of the distribution side of retail. From an in-store perspective, really, you've got to equip the associates with the right tools. Associates are consumers. So if you think about it, they have adapted. They know what's happening from a commerce perspective and a retail perspective because they are the consumer. So if they're not equipped to align with the folks that are coming in that they already know, with a handheld device that has access to all these wonderful things that we talked about, from a multi-channel experience, communications, inventory lookup, price check, etc., they're already at a disservice to that consumer. The consumer is going to know what they're looking for. They're going to be knowledgeable. They're going to have more product knowledge probably than the associate. And if you don't have a just-in-time tool in your hand, they're going to struggle. So you're seeing this movement where there's, retailers are equipping every associate one-to-one, a device that's equipped with the right software and solutions. And, obviously I work for a company this is what we do. And they have the ability to, react to the consumer. For the future, and I think it's just going to furthermore going into automation. And automation is important, again, because it comes down to efficiency and just the reduction of staffing in retail. So I'm a huge proponent to self-checkout. I think it's one of these concepts that has morphed over the course of the last 25 years. So you have your traditional, bioptic scanners if you're in a grocery grocery store to, traditional hand scanners that you leverage from a self checkout standpoint in your general merchandise or hard goods stores. Now, here's what I think is interesting. You're seeing a movement a little bit in retail with AI based self checkout systems where they're using images and scales built in. And it's, to me, it's a very fast, easy. We put everything on this on the underneath the camera. It takes a picture. It tells you how much it costs. You're on your way. It's really simple. And you can connect that to some of the loyalty apps in terms of payment standpoint. It becomes a really seamless experience, low touch experience for the consumer. You're starting to see investment in that. I know that a few of the convenience stores have, recently announced that they're going to start purchasing AI-based self-checkout. So I'm a huge proponent for looking into, technologies around that as it relates to, again, that end user experience. So consumer, how you equip the consumer as they go into the store to be self-sufficient, but also ensure that they feel important is critical. And I know that's kind of, it's almost an oxymoron to some degree, because you want them to feel self-sufficient, but you also want them to feel important. So the interaction has to be very pointed to that consumer and what they demand when they're in store. So that's what I'm seeing currently, and I think it's pretty interesting. Again, I think in the next 18 months to 3 years, you're going to see some pretty neat transitions in the retail technology segment.
Tony and I were just recently at an executive summit that BlueStar held, and we were dialoguing about some of these items. And one of the things that I found fascinating, because in my mind, and I was corrected, in my mind, I had the incorrect disposition that I felt like a lot of the innovation happened at the tier one retail level, right? And then trickled down.
Right.
And Tony and others like Jeff Riley corrected me. And I now see a whole new level, right? The SMB is where a lot of the innovation happens. And I think, right, Tony? Therefore, they see what's happening in the marketplace, but they're a lot more nimble to be able to facilitate some of these things.
You don't have to run up through a chain of 30 people and committees and board people or whatever to decide to make a dramatic shift in technology.
Yeah. So if you're a reseller, if you're a solutions integrator, and you have the same mindset as I have, that's not right. I guess we're not thinking of it the correct way.
Right.
You should be walking into those SMB retail establishments because they're hungry for that innovation, and they're willing to try some of those things because they understand the value of this whole experience type of thing. Like, for example, enabling associates, as you were touching on, Tony, with mobility in the store to maybe even do a frictionless checkout, at that point in time, or whatever it may be. The more frictionless you can make that whole experience, the better. Those are the people that are winning today, and those are the sales that you can make today. But just opening up that mindset of trying to enable that. Maybe it's a little bit of a software tweak, sure. In today's world, it's an API or something like that to enable it, but you can do those types of things, right?
I mean, can you imagine being like an SMB retailer and being able to say like, hey, there's something we can do that Walmart can't do.
Right.
There's something we can do that the Krogers of the world can't do.
Or make it easier, that much easier for their customers,
Right.
or fluid, or you would love the world where you walk up to somebody and, hey, we noticed in your cart you had these items too, and would you be interested in these types of, this is the innovation, right? That it's going to happen. I don't know. Right, Tony? So I was wrong. And innovation happens at the SMB.
I don't think you're wrong per se. I think it's just, so bigger companies are very proprietary and private about what they're innovating. So they're like, no, that's ours, we're not sharing. Where some of the smaller businesses, I think, are a little bit more apt to say, hey, we had to figure this out. We didn't have a choice because we don't have an innovation team or this, huge infrastructure from an IT perspective. So we had to go and figure this out. Now here, check out this new innovation that we have. So I don't think you were wrong per se. I just think it's easier to get that information. And there's an element of pride that comes from the small business community where they can share this information. That's, again, my perspective. I will say this, the one thing though that I think that I haven't mentioned, and I feel like I'd be, letting you guys down if I don't. Consumer behavior online is easy to track, right? You have credit information, you can track searches, so on and so forth. In store is a little bit more difficult. And I think this is another element that I think is critical for the consumer. So you can increase basket size. If there's any way to track, and I know there's ways to track the consumer in store, but tracking the consumer in store like you do online is important. So you can ensure that you're meeting their needs. And I think that's another technology I didn't mention, and I wanted to mention specifically, Dean, because I know I mentioned this when I was with you guys a couple weeks ago through the BlueStar event. But this in-store tracking to help and then provide a call to action that helps increase basket size in store is another critical element in technology that I think retailers should be paying attention to if they're not already. And I know a lot of them are, but some aren't. They're a little bit behind the curve on that.
Well, this is
Bingo.
perfect because we just had last week's
Spatial
episode,
Intelligence.
Spatial Intelligence with
That's right.
Pather talking all about that whole idea of tracking customers in stores. So,
Yes.
so put these two episodes together, and you've got like a pathway to some serious retail success here for your
Right?
customers.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, but there is movement there.
Yes.
And I like where you're going, Tony, about the frictionless kiosk, I guess, right? I think I saw my first example of that in the Phoenix airport, where they had one of those, just whatever, those stands that you can get up and get the convenience stuff, gum, water, whatever. But they had this self-checkout, but I believe it was camera-based. I don't know that they had a barcode scanner there. So it was just the AI saying, oh, that's the bottle of water.
You said it was in Phoenix, right?
It was in Phoenix.
I might have seen that same one too, because when I was out there a couple months ago,
Yes,
I there was a similar experience that I had where I had one of those little marketplace things.
Yes, that's
no
it.
attendance. It was all just it was all camera based. You just buy what you want, scan it up yourself, and move on. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, I'll wrap up.
Circle K just announced this, so you guys know this is publication out there that they're going to equip 7,000 stores with that type of technology. So the convenience element is there. That's one of the reasons why I mentioned that there's this significant movement. And Circle K has always done a good job at leading some of the innovations as it relates to technology. So I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. Yeah. You're speaking my language. I'm all about the self-checkout. I've always been an early adopter. Any time there's an opportunity
and touchless
to do it touchless on my own.
Yes.
Don't have to worry about anyone else. I'm the first guy who will get there and do that. So,
I will. I yell at my kids even when I go through self-checkout. I'm like, I am doing this. Don't touch the product. I got this. It's self-checkout.
No, it's Tony checkout.
Right. It's your place base. You want to work on it. Yeah. Oh. Well, I will wrap up this part of the conversation with a quote I found from Retail Customer Experience. They were again talking about retail trends to watch. And I thought this was a very timely quote and a great way to think about this. As the fight for consumer dollars continues to intensify, emerging as the easiest retailer to transact with is a winning strategy. And early adoption of emerging technologies may well be a critical part of that strategy.
I think that's what Tony just said, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's that is the key here, and that is a big takeaway I think for our VARs. But we'll give them another takeaway here in a moment. Before we do that, though, we want to, as always, thank our TEConnect members and sponsors, of which Honeywell is one. Thank you so much for sponsoring our show and for lending us Tony today, obviously, to have this conversation with. As always, if you like the show, let us know. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, leave us a comment. We want to hear from you. I love seeing that stuff. If you're listening on any podcaster of your choice, if there's an opportunity to rate and review, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star rating and review. I'm pretty sure we still just have the review from one of your kids.
Yes, I know.
Up there, and we get a lot of star ratings.
We're gonna get
but I want someone to leave us a review.
Type
Tell us,
in there.
This is your opportunity right now. Just go if you're listening on Apple Podcasts.
Even if it's Tony was awesome.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
Just leave that review.
You don't have to talk nice about us. It's fine. You tell us that our guests are amazing. And of course, if you want to get in touch with us, if you've got any ideas for the show, if there are topics you want to hear more about, if you want to hear more from folks like Tony or maybe another angle of this subject you'd like us to bring him back on and talk about, you can send those submissions to us anytime. We always have a link in our show notes.
Yep.
You can drop a submission for a topic to us, and just for doing it,
what do they get, Johnny?
We will send you a TEConnect podcast T-shirt.
There you go.
We need to actually be wearing those one day when we talk about that. But
that's a good idea.
It's a nice T-shirt. It's comfy. I promise you will enjoy it. And again, free. Nothing for you other than just telling us something you want to hear about on the show.
Love it. Yeah.
I mean, what more could you want? We're not asking a lot of you. And of course, as always, if you want to stay in touch with us, you can find us on Twitter. That's at TEConnectPod. You can also email us anytime, TEConnect@BlueStarInc.com. All right, let's wrap things up here with first our value to the VAR.
Yep.
This is our kind of way of giving a little bit of a takeaway to our audience, like something you can do and
although
take away
today's
now.
episode was pretty chock full of stuff,
I would
I'd
think
say.
so, but let's distill this down a little bit.
All
So
right.
addressing customer experience with tech is obviously important. But how can VARs also position their solutions as beneficial? And you kind of touched on this a little bit already, Tony, but we're going to dive into this a little further for the store owners and their employees too. So give us a little bit of insight on how the tech that our VARs are out there selling, this full solution, software, services, all this package, how is it actually helping out the employees as well?
Yeah, of course. I think and this is a really good question, and I think I experienced this as a disconnect when I was a decision maker in retail, and I think it's super important that folks understand that they're trying to solve problems that satisfy the consumer. So if you go in with that mindset and you go in with the mindset that I'm trying to solve a problem for you to help bridge the gap and from an experience perspective on the consumer, and you speak that language, unconditional if it's software or it's very specific technology, this technology solves this problem that you specifically have as a retailer. That is super critical, and it speaks the language of the end user, in my opinion. So when I had those experiences and folks came in, and it's not just about a device, it's not just about software, it's about, listen, we know that this is a significant problem you guys are up against right now. Here are some of the technologies that we offer that help solve it, and here's what we think the return is for you. This is what we think from a statistics and data and financial perspective. Well, you'll benefit. That's critical. That's the language of the retail. That's the language of store managers. I mean, they're all sales driven. So anything that you can do to help, increase overall customer satisfaction and increase sales from a solution perspective, and you speak that language, I think it's a win-win situation for both the retailer and the VAR.
I agree with you. And we'll go back to that efficiency thing, right? I mean, it's all about efficiencies right now. So have building solutions around that. It is critical. I mean, and there's some great stats on the Honeywell site as well that they kind of paint a picture of the cost of inefficiencies and how much wasted time there is without the technology that can be utilized to enable it. I think Tony's advice is dead on. Have some statistics around that so that you can arm yourself with good ROI walking into it. I mean, if you're going to try to sell a CT45 mobile computer, what is the ROI behind that? Have that talk track down and talk about the efficiencies that it's going to bring to the whole equation and enabling the associates on a myriad of levels. Front of house, back of house, those types of things. Yeah, you really, got to have that message down.
Definitely. And I'll go back to
So I think
go ahead.
It emulates almost the same behavior we talked about, as the consumer wants to feel like they're the retailer's best friend. The retailer wants to feel like they're the supplier's best friend. The bars, they know them that well. Do your homework. Dean, I think you hit it. You have to do your homework and understand what you're trying to solve.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll go back to something I think I harp on this show a lot, which is the idea of having the same kind of technology in your work life that you have in your personal life, or at least as good, if not better. And I feel like far too many employers don't get that sometimes. And I'll go back to my retail days 20 years ago now. When I was, getting more into I had a nice computer at home and was playing around online and all kinds of cool stuff with the internet was booming, and yet I go to work and I'm on green screens. Yeah. And
terminal.
I have very limited access to inventory data. I could not tell you what any other store had.
Hold on, Control F.
I couldn't tell you what was coming to my store anytime soon. It was frustrating to me to do that. And honestly, if you think about it, a lot of times your employees, your frontline employees especially that are out there with customers, are, whether intentional or not, they're advocates for your business.
Oh, yeah.
Not just in the sense of you want them to go out there and sell and be good with customers, but, if I walk into some kind of an establishment and I'm getting ready to check out, or someone's trying to look something up for me and they're like, oh, this stupid computer, it's so slow, our systems are crap around here. That you're sending a message to me, whether they like it or not, whether you realize it or not, they're sending a message that your company's not particularly innovative, and they're not bothering to have innovative technology. I know sometimes people just will complain for the sake of complaining, but you kind of start noticing that. You start paying attention, oh man, these guys can't just pull up a quick check on inventory in a couple of seconds. It's taking 5 minutes for that, or they just
don't know.
They can't process my payment fast enough, or something. That's the kind of stuff that you hear them griping about it. It's kind of like them sort of griping about your company too. So why not equip them with the best technology that they can have?
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, well said.
All right. Well, hey, let's wrap up as always with our favorite segment, What's Tech Connecting with You? This is where we get to talk about something from the world of science, tech, innovation that has caught our eye, has our attention, something we're excited about, something we're dreading. Who knows what it could be? Tony, I'll let you start. What's Tech Connecting with You right now?
I think this is a great question, and it was exciting because I'm not going to talk about anything that Honeywell does, but I am going to talk about the sneaker industry, because I think these sneakers that are biometrically equipped are super cool. I'm an athlete. I've been an athlete my entire life, but now you have sneakers that monitor everything from how much pressure you put on your foot to your vital statistics to it, and communicates with an app. And I think that's really cool because you don't think about it, right? It's on your foot. You don't have to strap anything else on. So it's a relatively new innovation, and it's something that I know a pair of. Check them out, biometric sneakers, and all like New Balance, Reebok, Nike, they all have them. They all do something a little bit different, but I love that stuff. So I know that's probably a little bit outside of the ordinary from a typical tech, but I love that stuff. So yeah, I think the biometric sneakers are cool.
So help me understand, like, so if you're working out, like it's measuring the pressure that you're putting on, and then that's relative, right? You would use that information to see how efficient you were in your workout and those kinds of things. Is that what it's telling you?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, so there's an element of that in terms of foot placement. So are my heels placed correctly when I'm squatting? Am I then from a vital perspective? What was my heart rate? I know some of them collect step data. I know there's apps, like the Fitbit and things of that nature. Your Apple phones collect steps. So it just really varies. I think there's different apps that do different things. Different sneakers offer different biometrics, but I just think it's a neat way to, collect that information and see how you're performing from a, athletic perspective. But yeah,
Can we agree not to put any like speakers or anything on them though? Like, I don't want to have to put my sneakers on. It's like, John, you haven't worn me in a week, Like,
no shaming from
I
your
feel like
speakers.
I get enough shame from my watch and all the other apps and stuff. Yeah,
stand.
exactly.
Right, yeah,
I don't need my sneakers to start mouthing off to me too.
Oh man,
That's good
stuff. Yeah.
All right, what's tech connecting with you, Dean?
All right, here's the headline: the James Webb Space Telescope. Remember that
One
thing?
of our favorites.
That $10 billion thing.
Yep.
Survives strike by micrometeor. Engineers say that the systems are functioning normally. So since this thing launched, and this is that beautiful, ginormous telescope, I guess, basically
Taking some amazing pictures.
taking unbelievable pictures. It's already been nailed 4 times by micrometeors. So what is a micrometeor, might you ask? What do you
what I was
think?
gonna ask.
What do you think a micrometeor
I would guess
is?
like we're talking like seriously small.
Like, well, okay, so
like,
what's seriously
like
small?
A micrometer maybe in size.
So this is smaller than a grain of sand.
Yeah, but that can be dangerous in space.
Dude, yeah, when you're traveling however many tens of thousands of miles, and then one of these things, bing, hits off of a mirror, it creates this little divot, right? And so, and that is got to be so frustrating for the engineers, because I mean, down to, and these are 0.1 of a micrometer is what they're measuring. So it is really small stuff, and they expected some of this to happen, and they engineered some of it, but I guess this one that hit was a little bigger than they thought it was going to be, and now they're going to have to adjust one of the 18 mirrors that is on this thing in order to compensate. I love that word. We're going to compensate for the micrometeor hit that was happening. Wouldn't you just pull your hair out if you were one of these engineers? I mean, you spent your life, tens of billions of dollars, get it launched up. It's 1,000,000 miles away. Everything's running hunky-dory, and then bing.
Yep. Like you had to perfect this already. Yeah.
There's this little micrometer that comes in and hits your daggone telescope and throws the whole thing off.
Exactly.
Oh my God, that's got to be
space dust.
Space dust.
Yeah, space dust. There you go.
I mean, but how much of that is floating out there? There's got to be a ton of that,
Oh
right?
yeah. I mean,
when you get
not even counting the space junk that we've put up.
No, this is 1,000,000 miles away.
Just the space dust
Exactly.
itself. Yeah, what's already existing out there.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Oh man, I mean, yeah, I can see like a meteor. I guess they'll just throw it away at that point if something big enough happens. But these guys are measuring it that small. It's like, oh man, good luck.
Space is a dangerous and terrifying place.
Yeah.
When something smaller than a grain of rice or a grain of sand can cause potentially such damage and harm.
No, like a tenth of the size of a grain of sand, and they're worried about it.
Yeah.
It's like there's got to be a ton of that out there. Anyway, that was TEConnect.
Kudos to those people too. That's the kind of stuff you have to think about.
Yes,
when you're putting something
you and
up
I
there.
can't get a good night's sleep because we're worried about retail or something like that. These guys are worried about micrometers.
I'm worried about if I'm going to have a good intro for tomorrow's podcast.
Exactly. Yeah.
These scientists are worried about
the billions of micrometers that are going to hit this 10
billions of particles floating around in space. Yeah. So
anyway, what's TEConnecting?
They probably get paid a hell of a lot more to worry about that stuff too, though. So
that's true.
All right. So remember Google Glass?
Oh yes, the flash in the pan that was Google Glass.
Yes, and
the $1,500 per item. Yeah.
Well, Google's got a new idea with glasses, but this one I think actually sounds very smart and not as we're not ready for this as Google Glass clearly was.
Pray tell.
So apparently, the Google I/O 2022, a few months back, they introduced, and it was a very brief kind of like little video introduction. Not a lot of details yet. They haven't named it. They don't have a lot of information, but basically glasses that can translate language.
Okay, and then you see it?
Yes.
Okay.
So let's say you are speaking Spanish or Mandarin or something or whatever you're speaking, and maybe you understand me, you understand English, but you can't speak it back to me in English. You can only speak in your language. I would put these glasses on, which they just look like normal glasses. And as you're speaking, a little translation's popping up in the
real
corner
time.
of my field with the
Now
actual
that's a good
translation.
use of the technology.
I think so
like
too.
this.
I think it's a very smart idea. It's pretty
Very niche-y, maybe.
pretty simple. But I mean, again, I know we've got translation apps on phones and stuff, but there's always a little bit of lag time with those, and and it's just can be a little cumbersome. But just imagine just being able to just slip on a pair of glasses, and for me as someone who wears glasses all the time, give me something like that embedded in, where I could easily have a conversation with somebody. Again, the trick of it obviously is like if they don't understand your language, they'd have to be wearing glasses also.
Yeah.
But assuming that they are, and let's be honest, for us English speakers of the world, usually you travel somewhere, everyone else is multilingual, and we're the idiots.
We're the idiots
that only
that don't
know
know.
one
Yeah,
language.
we know one
Yeah.
language.
So it'd probably be very beneficial for us. But I thought, I'm like, hey, that's a pretty neat, simple use of a concept that is not trying to
That's
go
the
as
way they should have
dramatically
launched
far
them.
as Google Glass.
They should have
did,
launched
yeah.
it that way. They should have done the crawl, walk, run.
Exactly.
Right? Rather than the full sprint that they tried with the Google
Yep.
Glass.
I think they tried to do a little running first.
Oh,
before
yeah.
we got there.
Oh, I thought you were going to say like a little microphone comes out in front of you and like you can talk through it.
Now,
and, like,
I'm sure there could be an iteration. Like they didn't explain a lot about how all this works. Like as far as are there cameras involved?
did they show it working though? Was it like a
The
real
video,
full up unit?
like it was no, it was like the
It
video.
wasn't awkward like when Elon Musk came out
No.
with his Android and it was a person.
No. This was like a pre-produced video that, for all could have had computer-generated graphics
Oh,
or
okay,
something.
got it,
But
got it.
conceptually, it was
Yeah,
there.
gotcha.
So there's definitely a lot of stuff to learn about it. I'm sure we are a few years away from these being a practical use. But
Fair enough.
I just it's one of those things. I'm like, that's a very simplistic step in the right direction for a problem. That,
I like it.
That does clearly exist
I like
out
it.
there.
Yep,
So.
for sure.
All right. Hey, that does it for us today. That's what's Tech Connecting with us. Tony Boncore from Honeywell.
Tony.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It is time.
Thank you for having me.
It is, of course, time for us to unplug. So until next time, think very hard about all the micrometers
Duck.
stuff just flying around in space. and
Don't let it hit you.
hope it doesn't hit you. and when next time you need to get something translated, maybe find a nice pair of glasses.
There you go.
So
Google
you
Glass.
can see a whole industry built up around that.
Fair enough.
And of course, as always, folks, please stay connected. TEConnect podcast is brought to you by Honeywell. All right, Dean, we just talked about the importance of modern technology to enable retailers to provide the experiential shopping that customers want.
Yeah, and need. Yes.
And need, yes, while also making their own staff more efficient and productive.
That's right.
All right, now Honeywell is backing up their expertise here with their latest enterprise mobile computer, the CT30XP.
Nice.
Already a winner of the Red Dot Product Design and IF Design Awards.
Did
Pretty
not know
impressive.
that.
You put out a
Yes,
new product
sir.
and you've already won awards.
Bingo. Yeah. Winner.
That would be like if we'd won like some kind of podcasting award.
Wait,
like after
didn't we do
released
that?
our first. Well,
Yes.
yeah, but
Oh.
not after like the first few episodes.
okay. Took us a year.
Took us a couple of years to get there. We did, but
Yeah.
they weren't just throwing the awards. It was like, this is amazing.
Yeah, right.
Mostly they were just like, what is this? The CT30XP combines the elegant design and usability of a high-end mobile phone without compromising the durability, manageability, or business functionality serious businesses depend on. Combined with powerful Honeywell software such as Operational Intelligence, Smart Talk, Unified Communications, and Smart Pay contactless payment, the CT30XP is an ideal platform on which users in retail, healthcare, and delivery can build effective solutions.
It's loaded.
That's pretty impressive.
That
That's
was
that's
loaded
that's a
with
lot
stuff.
Of stuff. Hang on, we're
Absolutely.
not even done.
Oh.
5.5-inch FHD screen.
Check.
Slim, lightweight, yet durable.
Check.
It even has a pleasing curved edge aesthetic that makes it look like an upscale device for customer-facing top-tier retail or hospitality venues.
Check.
Look, I'll be honest. If I'm going into a high-end store
Yeah.
and they're using dirty, old, scratched-up, ancient-looking tech,
Right?
I might think that represents their quality of service,
You
too.
think so?
Yeah.
100%.
If
Yeah.
it's just some beat-up old BlackBerry or something, like,
Gotta look good.
No,
It's gotta look
no,
good.
Sorry.
Yep.
Wi-Fi 6 options, Honeywell's mobility edge platform, flex range, scan engine, enterprise software compatibility. The CT30XP has a lot to offer your customers.
That's a lot packed in that thing.
That
Come
is a
on
lot.
now. Yeah.
No reason not to be trying this thing out. To learn more, check out the link in the show notes or contact your BlueStar Honeywell representative.